best yet, we can move on to our final panel for the day. This actually is a full, proper panel. And I'm going to let Maryn, a returning superstar who often speaks eloquently about peace and how we can function in a more peaceful world and how we can fund peace, or perhaps more importantly, how peace can fund us and therefore become a driving factor. And she has an exciting panel assembled today. And so without further ado, I'll let her take things over and let's close out day one with a very happy hug instead of a bang. How's that go?
I love that. Happy hugs, Chris. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. And thank you so much to Anand and the entire team at Davos Worldwide for producing such a superstar conference. And it is our great honor and delight to be here and to celebrate Davos and this pivotal moment in the world for world peace. And so we're very happy to be here. We have a superstar panel of industry leading experts, and we are very excited to share with you how the power and responsibility of CSR to make peace more profitable than war. So without further ado, we will start the panel and with a warm aloha to everyone, and also welcome to this panel. I am very in honor and reverence of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm here calling in from Palm Beach, Florida. This is Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the United States and also around the world. We celebrate the peace leaders that have come before us and that are here now, and that really have blazed the trail for world peace. So I'm here sitting in the seats, truly standing on the shoulders of giants and doing what I can do in this generation to achieve world peace. And as Martin Luther King Jr. said so poignantly years ago, this dream that he had, that he shared, and that we all share for a peaceful and equal and thriving world and opportunities for all of us. So in that spirit, we are very happy and grateful to share this panel with all of you and really address some very poignant topics. I wrote a few words about this to introduce, so I will read these words. So today, in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. and in honor of peace leaders around the world, past and present, and in the future, we are launching this conversation around the Peace Pledge. We meet at a moment of profound global urgency. Around the world, conflict and instability continue to shape daily life. From Gaza to Ukraine, from Iran to Venezuela, from rising geopolitical tensions in places like Greenland and beyond. These are not isolated crises. They are symptoms of a world paying the high cost of division, fear, and fragmented systems. And yet, we are here because we believe something different is possible. We are in a unique position at the intersection of business, capital, policy, and conscience and consciousness to move beyond reaction and towards infrastructure, to design systems where peace is not just hoped for, but is measurable, investable, and economically reinforced. Today's conversation here at Davos and worldwide is about how CSR, conscious entrepreneurship, and aligned leadership can help make peace not only morally necessary, but strategically inevitable. Because peace is not passive, peace is designed. And as designers of peace, we are very happy to be here and to share with you some wisdom and infrastructure around how to make this not only possible, but inevitable right now. And we are all here and invited to introduce ourselves. I will begin with 1 to 2 minutes. And I am your moderator for today. My name is Maryn Soref, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Peace Train. We are a global community and of artists and creators and peace leaders. that are creating together a creator economy and world peace economy to make peace more profitable than war and to achieve world peace by 2030. And world peace is not only possible, it is inevitable when at least 10% of people, and of course we're going for everyone, well, when at least 10% of people on the planet embody inner peace, tangible prosperity, and living in purpose. And with sustainable connectivity, all of us can enjoy the thriving on this planet and beyond together and create the infrastructure so that this is possible for everyone on the planet and for future generations. And we are very happy to be here and to convene this panel. This is what we do: is we partner with global leading organizations like Davos Worldwide to produce panels and events highlighting peace leaders and artists, and also to curate global leadership gatherings pairing world leaders with artists to share practices for holistic health and well-being with global leaders, and also to share this meta-narrative and message of world peace, and to share all of the organizations, the best organizations in the world for peace, prosperity, and purpose with the world in a docu-series on a metaverse and beyond, and create an entire creator economy around this and beautiful community around the world. So we are very happy and grateful to be here and to curate this panel. And I am joined by fellow superstar leaders in the space who are truly some of my heroes on so many levels. And so I'm very, very grateful that they agreed to take time out of their very busy schedules to join this panel at Davos and worldwide and beyond. And so so much gratitude and big thanks to our panelists today. If you would please introduce yourselves and share about yourselves and your companies before we begin the questions, that would be so appreciated. And thank you all for being here. It's such an honor and a joy to moderate this panel and to be here with all of you, my heroes, some of my heroes. So thank you so much. Let's start with Bill. Does that sound? Bill, and
Sure.
then David and David. I love the twinning Davids. This is so great.
Yeah, no, terrific. Yeah, it is absolutely a privilege to be here with you all. So I'm Bill Deuchler. Very grateful to have been partnered up with Maryn with the Peace Train and the Peace Pledge, of which I'm treasurer and chief investment officer, and trying to keep the train on the rails the whole time. In addition to that, I've been a trustee for a municipal pension plan for the last 10 years. I've also been chief investment officer for two family offices and have kind of a long history in the institutional investing markets. So that's a lot where my background is. I would also add that I've had some interesting connections with the Economics of Mutuality Group, which functions out of Oxford. And I know a couple of the founders of that. Very interesting organization, very much themes that are aligned with what we're trying to accomplish here at the Peace Pledge and the Peace Train. So with that introduction, I'll hand it over to either one of the Davids for you guys to go, and then we'll jump into the panel.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Maryn. I am David Chen, currently based in Princeton, New Jersey. And prior to this, I was based in Shanghai, China for about 12 years or so, doing primarily angel investing, working with startups and founders and helping them grow and helping them scale, helping them exit, right? Things that typically we see in the entrepreneurial landscape. And while this panel is about CSR, I want to take this a level further because it really is about the people, right? Especially when we invest in startup companies. And it's not so much about the entity as it is about the people involved. And a couple of years ago, I started something called the Princeton Venture Studio. And initially, it was really meant to be a platform to help researchers out of Princeton University and other schools to take research ideas and turn that into products and then companies. And throughout the course of my journey as being an investor and entrepreneur, I got really deep into this notion of purpose and self-realization. and discovery of myself through consciousness and meditation and other forms that we look at these days that are kind of not scientific, but in reality, it is scientific, right? So, as it relates to this panel today, my focus really these days is about conscious entrepreneurship. How do we empower the individuals, the teams behind the ideas that become companies that hopefully can be innovative to build great new products, but also change the world in positive ways, right? And in order to solve some of the big problems that we see today, whether it's climate change or lack of peace or whatever it really starts at the individual level and improving oneself to be able to elevate consciousness so that when we have that elevation and connect with other people who are also on this path, right, of elevation and awakening, I want to say. And hopefully through the intersection and the interaction amongst these people, we as a group get to change the world in positive ways that make an impact. So that's why I'm here today. Thanks, Maryn.
Oh, great. Thank you, David and Bill. So I am David Levine, and I have been at this for a while, a social entrepreneur for about over 40 years, usually focusing on whole system solution for a sustainable society and economy through broad stakeholder initiatives. And back in 2008, I founded the American Sustainable Business Council, which is now the American Sustainable Business Network, with both a C3 and a C4, and I sit as the president. And the American Sustainable Business Network is where businesses build the case together for a generative economy. So our mission is to inform, connect, mobilize, and amplify the collective voice of sustainable business, responsible business leaders to transform the public and private sectors towards a just and regenerative economy. So we have a number of areas of work which we see as very interconnected. You know, the pillars are governance and accountability, sustainability and regeneration, equity and inclusion, and regenerative economics. And so together with businesses, business organization, investors, business leaders, we work to build this regenerative economy by advancing through education, research, narrative shifting to deepen the understanding and the implementation of responsible and sustainable business practices. And we do that by focusing on network development, collaboration and coalition building, media engagement, issue advocacy, and also work to change the rules to drive on policy, and particularly at the federal and at the state levels as well. So, such a pleasure to be here today.
Wow, thank you all. It's just, I'm so in awe of all of your work, and it's such an honor and a joy for all of you to be here today and to have this very important conversation about peace within all of these different frameworks. And today we explore how CSR, alongside conscious entrepreneurship and also capital and business networks, can actively design peace. And so with all of us as the architects, we dive into the questions. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom. So we will begin with a question for Bill around the Peace Pledge, and if you could please share a bit about, and also I am very happy and grateful to co-design the Peace Pledge with Bill. It's been just such an epic collaboration, and I'm just so grateful for Bill's stewardship and guidance, and in a lot of ways mentorship around how to design these structures, and as he shared, to keep the peace train on track, and really with the Peace Pledge, this collaboration between vision and also Bill's deep background and expertise with infrastructure, and as I share about it, creating spaceships, which is the infrastructure and the containers for all of this conscious capital to flow through to resource the founding alliance of the peace train and beyond, to businesses that are doing good work in the world for peace. So for peace, prosperity, and purpose. So so that's a personal note before we dive in. And I'm very grateful for Bill for his stewardship and guidance and co-creation and partnership. Thank you so much. And so question for Bill with the Peace Pledge. What is the Peace Pledge and why does it matter now? And also incorporating translating values into measurable, investable action, and why peace must be treated as a shared economic responsibility between all of us. So if you could please share a bit about that and whatever else you feel to share with this question, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, just a small question, given the months and months that have gone into all of this. But nonetheless, let me start with just sort of a moment of a very kind of high level in terms of what we're attempting to do at the Peace Pledge. And certainly the Peace Pledge, in addition to being an active commitment for individuals and commercial partners, is also a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And our aim is, alongside of our sister organization, the Peace Train, is to develop and support a global cross-marketing community where we can provide awareness across global segments, both within and beyond the current exposures that our partners have. Our hope is to become a ubiquitous but intentional brand and a vehicle where common values can make really real tangible impact. And as Maryn was stating before, we really do stand at a very unique crossroads in world history at this time, because we're cycling between perhaps a unipolar and a multipolar orientation. Conflict is going around the world, but hopes and action for peace are also strong. And we see this on a global, a regional, a national, and even a community scales. So the opportunity to partner up with other organizations and be able to spread the word and take tangible action through the use of implementing CSR budgets to fund, best practices wherever we can find them, is a way that we want to try to bring some real meat to the bone and tangible process to affecting peace overall. I think that given the circumstances that we have, kind of an opportunity for introspection and commitment is the same thing. David, I like your comment about sort of how this journey, has impacted you and the whole notion of stewardship, which I think is such a key thing. We have commercial endeavors that we're all involved with, and that's so important because that puts food on the table and creates opportunities for others. But at the same time, it also is a vehicle for influence and positive change. So, by examining and taking stock of that, how do we stewardship the available capital that we have, whether that be, physical capital, whether it be financial capital, or whether it be individual capital? How can we contribute that, for the best and highest use, for mankind, if you will? There's an interesting old ancient verse that comes to mind in the sense that we have set before us the choice of life and death. So choose life that you may live. And I think that on a broad scale, making those choices every day, and certainly in the context of our organizations, in terms of where we want to put our commitments, is like super important. So that's kind of the, at a very high level, what we're doing at the Peace Pledge. Sort of the motivation for why now. It's like, why not? And I think that there are many opportunities out there. So I'll pass the baton, but happy to come back and talk to a couple of examples that come to mind.
Wonderful, Bill. Thank you so much. I so appreciate that you and that epic description of the Peace Pledge. And it is so true. We, to create the the structures around funding peace, as well as enterprises that can keep generating revenue and support the best organizations in the world for peace. And one note on this as well, with the inspiration around this, I was very inspired by an organization called 1% for the Planet. And so with the creation of this, and so one of the initiatives, is really engaging CSR. 1% for the Planet engages large companies to support organizations that they've curated that are doing the best work in the world for environmental stewardship and protection of the planet. And so very much in this way, I felt that peace is the most important thing to protect. We want to protect all of our inner peace as well as the peace in our surroundings, inner surroundings and outer surroundings. And also peace leaders are systemically underfunded. And so this is one of the ways that we can contribute our piece of peace and galvanize all of these organizations very much, and to create this network that all unifies together for peace, and also to support the peace leaders on the planet, because there's so many organizations that are doing the best work in the world for peace on the front lines of conflict zones, to companies that are like Guru Dev, that are sharing these really powerful meditations and with breath work, so that everyone can unlock their own inner peace and do so easily, and really get these programs out to the world. So inspired by 1% for the Planet, I said, what if everyone contributes 2%? To take the Peace Pledge and contributes 2% to peace. And I love this campaign. I look forward to the flourishing of this campaign as everyone says 2% and contributes 2%. So, and just that that was one more note on that as well. And Bill, thank you so much for your stewardship and for what you shared as well. Happy to dovetail with you always. And also one last note on this that I wrote down is that peace is not a philanthropic afterthought. It is an economic strategy. And so excited to dive into how peace is implemented as an economic strategy with everyone as well. And Bill, did you have any, before we move on to David and to the twinning Davids, did you have any notes on how peace is an economic strategy as well?
Sure, I think,
well versed.
yeah. I think one of the an interesting story to tell is it goes back to the origins. I mentioned the Organization of Economics of Mutuality. That actually started with the Mars Candy company many years ago, and they again, not to pick on David, but at a very high level at the company, they were very interested in terms of analyzing their own motivations. What are we developing profits for? And they began to look into that and realize that they did have power to affect not only economic but social change, and to bring elements that would be far more conducive to peaceful coexistence, if you will, among communities. And they looked around the globe and saw that there was a ripe opportunity in Africa, where there was a number of communities that they had identified very much on disadvantaged, not really growing very well. And so they sent trainers in there to essentially to hire locals to try to, admittedly, again, it was a commercial enterprise. So they were looking to help foster greater adoption of their products. But the whole idea was to involve all the stakeholders who were involved, potential employees, customers, organizations in the area, things like that, and be able to give back to that. The results of the effort to bring additional economic opportunity to that region were really quite amazing. Communities were transformed. People all of a sudden had incomes who didn't have incomes before. and was just really a huge success. So even though that wasn't dollars, from the CSR budget, but nonetheless, I think it shows a good model of what can happen when you apply capital into a situation and you can get very meaningful and very tangible results that create benefits in an environment that's just opens up possibilities for people. And I think that therein, you have the kind of results that will really warm the human heart, so to speak.
I love that so much, and my heart is warmed from you and what you're sharing, because it's so inspirational on so many levels, and that's such a great example of how empowering prosperity can really empower peace. So I'm very grateful for you and for sharing that that wonderful insight. And I do also think that, once people know, excuse me, once people know about all of these opportunities that are available for creating prosperity that empowers peace, that people will support it. And that's one of the things that we are also focused on, is the storytelling of this, and really sharing these stories with the world in a way that empowers the organizations with the resources that they need to achieve their goals. And so that's an excellent example. Thank you so much, Bill. That's absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. And so now and moving on from that with this wonderful example, and also really creating it's such a great dovetail of how these structures for prosperity and supporting business in these regions can really lead to meaningful peace. And so with that, I'm very excited and very grateful that David Levine is joining us, and I'm absolutely in awe of everything that he's created with the American Sustainable Business Network, and also how truly empowering prosperity with businesses and utilizing the power of business to affect social change. David Levine is one of the world experts in this and leaders in this. So I'm very grateful that he's joined us for this panel to share wisdom on multiple different fronts of how he's achieved this and his insights therein. So, David, if you could please introduce, you already introduced ASBN, and also I'm curious before we dive into the additional questions, what does peace mean to you? And how do you feel that peace is an integral part of business? Because you're so peaceful. Like whenever we speak, I'm always just like, wow, like it's amazing. So I'm very grateful for you being here.
Look, I think, yeah, well, thank you. But the key, particularly in crisis, right, is to be able to sustain oneself in order to be able to engage in all the work they were engaging in at this moment in time, right? Our personal wellness, can allow us to stay healthy and well in order to engage, right, in these really trying times. And the other piece of it is, those that are fortunate to do this work are surrounded by so many different phenomenal people that are also in their own different ways that are doing this work, and that creates that broader community that we so desperately need in order to we can't do this alone. This is not about our personal egos or personal, it's about our personal journeys to join with others and create the piece of this that we can contribute, and to the greater whole. And being able to do that, it's just, I think, creates the kind of inner and outer peace that we're needing to work on, and that we need to survive as well as to thrive.
Absolutely. I love how beautifully you shared that, because it truly is, it's about thriving. And also I really love how you shared that inner peace creates outer peace, because that is so important. And really, especially with the power of business networks like yours, and like all of yours actually. You all have very powerful business networks. Really focusing on inner peace as a way to outer peace is certainly the key. So
Well, we're working on them both simultaneously, not one to the other, but one and the other together. Because it's kind of hard, when you're under the pressures of all the instability and crisis, to not also focus on that directly as a means to be able to create the personal wellness, right? Is so both at the same time we're going for.
I love that. Absolutely. It's like a double rainbow. So great. So with that, I'm curious from your experience, how as with CSR and also with conscious businesses that are in your network, how and also being in the industry for 40 years, which is just wow. I'm so in awe of you, and you look great. Just like, what are your biohacking practices for being in the industry for 40 years? How has CSR shifted from doing less harm to actively shaping systems?
Well, I think right now also we're at a very unique moment, because of some of the, certainly in the United States and elsewhere, the sort of the pressures, that have been levied against CSR, sustainability, ESG, DEI, et cetera, et cetera. And what we've seen, certainly is that there are the companies that have backed off their commitments, that had made some commitments, backed off. Perhaps some of that was greenwashing and whitewashing and the like, not real commitments at the end of the day, but because the train was moving in that direction, they jumped on and the like. We see a lot of companies, though, that have remained committed to their mission, their principles, their practices of CSR, ESG, DEI, and the like, but have actually changed some of the language because they fear the retribution of the present U.S. administration or perhaps other administrations across the world. But what we also see is that there are many companies that are advancing this work, are deepening this work, and are also speaking out and taking public actions to advance this work. Look, I think the bottom line was that many investors and businesses that picked this up have always understood that these practices are provide economic benefit for their companies. And it's just straight up, it's just good business, period, and the like. So we're seeing, you know, some of the differences now than decades ago is that we're seeing more and more companies forming new corporate forms. So whether it's benefit corporations, limited liability corporation, perpetual trust corporations, or setting themselves up as a social enterprise, they're baking in their commitment to sustainability, to all these practices that we're talking about in their corporate structure as well as in their practices. So they're addressing environmental factors in their internal practices, what they produce, how they produce it, how they address circularity, including extended producer responsibility. They're investing to drive impact for a more inclusive economy. So it's how they treat their workers. Perhaps they're worker owned, employee owned, and there's workplace democracy. And maybe they're working hard to include in their workforce and who they serve those that have been traditionally left out, whether it's women, BIPOC, on just underserved altogether. Or, maybe what they're doing also is recognizing the very importance to community of small and medium enterprises, those companies that are embedded in communities and really can act as a stabilizing force. So whether that's stability for peace, stability for economic wellness, stability for well-being overall. And, that's crucial. And I think, again, always as a part of this, it's our ability to come together to actually drive the safety net that's needed, right? By doing this together and by being able to create the opportunities for business innovation when we're smarter together, right? but also to create the change in the rules and the public policy shifts because we have a collective power.
I love that actually, and question on what you just shared, especially coming from the United States, because that was such an incredible share and an overview of and with specifics of the landscape of conscious business right now. And what you just shared about the policies, I'm just curious as well. Are there in the United States, are there policies? I know that there are movements and social movements for incorporating these practices, as you shared, of ESG, DEI, and all of these things, whatever language that we use, opportunities to create these more inclusive, equal opportunity workplaces for people to live, as well as really taking care of people on the planet, integrated into the infrastructure of the business itself. Are there policies around this currently in the administration? And if not, what can we do as a collective to really to advance these policies? Or is it more of a kind of a everyone's doing it, so get on board type situation?
Well, you have a lot of things going on at one time. The federal administration at the moment has not been supportive of most of these policies. So whether it's the investing policies and restricting, the advancement of ESG principles in what companies and investors could advance, or the inclusive economy part of it, and so. Listen, unfortunately, some of the work has had to be challenging those positions, of this in certain states. We had filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas for their anti-ESG law, which was preventing businesses from choosing the practices they want, to follow in terms of environment, social, and governance, or the federal administration's policy anti-DEI, executive orders that got put in place, clearly on day one and the like, and so there are many businesses and investors that have stepped up to challenge that, and that's really important. But at the same time, what we're seeing is, a strong investment in state and local policy that recognize these values, and they understand the importance to their communities to ensure that the proper investments are taking place, that they're investing in local enterprises, right, that are embedded within their communities. They're investing in environmentally preferable purchasing, right? So governments and institutions are advancing and purchasing from companies that have products that are performing well and are also safer. Or we're looking at policies that look at transparency in lending so that we can make sure that what we're doing here is not creating greater harm. So there's a lot of policy in movements and possibilities. But look, also at the federal level, we've not seen everything disappear. We have a public-private partnership with the U.S. Department of Interior. It was signed with Secretary Haaland as the Secretary of the Interior. But it has remained in place. And this is to advance economic opportunities for tribal nations and tribal communities across the United States. So why is that still in place? Well, partially because it's about economic opportunity and driving that. Partially, we think it's because tribal nations are still understood as separate sovereign nations and the like. So they're not necessarily included in the BIPOC realm of the concerns that have been raised there as well. But so some of those policies, and perhaps there are opportunities to advance more, but many have seen the opportunity for policy change to be advanced at the local and state level.
That's very encouraging, and I'm happy to hear that, despite federal federal support or not, that that states are taking it upon themselves to implement these practices that I imagine are aligned with the values of the community. And hopefully, when enough of that happens, then the federal government will also get on board with that as well. Because I really think, especially at this time, these shareholder values, are very important for economic prosperity. So when there are enough companies that are practicing, these sustainable business practices, which everything that you mentioned, it actually creates sustainable businesses, hence your network, and also is aligned with values that people are actively investing in and supporting. The purchasing power of the not just of the American public and also of global investment. To support companies that are aligned with their values. What also really moves the needle is that local and grassroots support. So I'm very happy to hear that there's advancements that are being made, and thank you so much for your work with stewarding that as well and being a resource for businesses that are affecting change on local and also on federal levels. And that's so inspiring. Thank you so much. And also, I'm curious. One last question. In regards to peace, how do you see peace as integrated with these business practices? And do you think that there is a unifying narrative that peace can bring to these policies beyond the disagreements at federal levels regarding ESG, DEI, and what would that look like from your perspective and your network to implement peace as a practice?
Right. I'm going to go quick because I want my fellow David to get his D squared time as well. But what I would say is, listen, sustainable business practices often prioritize fair wages, safe working conditions, human rights, which, creates lesser tension, right? Ethical supply chains help prevent labor exploitation, child labor, forced labor, all of which link to instability and violence, right? Transparent and accountable business practices can build trust between companies, governments, communities, right? And then in terms of the environment, we see a lot of the world conflict about resource scarcity. So you apply sustainability practices and the like, and you have the possibility for linking that to reducing instability, violence, and work towards peace. So, they just lower the tension and stress across the board. We have climate, immigrant folks that are being displaced from their communities because of the climate impact. We see the fights over resources, etc. And all of that leads to instability, stress, violence, etc. And sustainable business practices could help us drive that. But as always, with everything I'm saying, it really is about us working together. And business has a role and a responsibility. And that's what we're hoping to drive, in every community across the states, in the nation, and in international cooperation as well.
Wow, bravo. Absolutely. That's so amazing, and you're truly the leader in doing that. So thank you so much for your work in leading that and staying so committed to your goals with that, because from what I'm hearing is that sustainable business practices like you've been promoting and gathering companies around for years are actually the tangible pathways to the outcome of peace. So I'm very grateful for you for being here, and thank you for sharing all of that wisdom and for continuing on the path of the American Sustainable Business Network and creating this alliance for business as a force for social good. So thank you so much, David. So appreciate you. Thank you for being here. And very, very aligned with and in with conscious businesses. and also from a different lens. I'm very, very pleased that and so grateful that David Chen has joined us as well from the Princeton Venture Studio, and also with a deep background in conscious entrepreneurship and business, and how business is utilized for a force for good. So thank you so much, David, for joining us, and I'm excited to dive in to your expertise with this as well. From your experience of how entrepreneurs and angel networks and early stage capital can embed peace, responsibility, and positive CSR from within companies from the inception of the companies, how would you define conscious entrepreneurship, and why is it essential in today's geopolitical and economic climate? Thank you so much.
Well, today we're talking about peace. And as I think about peace, um, what is the opposite? It's the absence of peace, right? And that can be observed in conflict or war, right? I mean, and it boils down to, I feel, to your question, Maryn, about a framework that I typically use for startups. And it goes like this. It starts with intention, a vision and an intention for what you want to build, what you want to create, which leads to goals, which leads to a strategy and leads to execution. And in the context of peace, whether you're a startup leader or a leader of a country, right? The question that we have to ask ourselves is, what are the intentions of our leaders? And then how do we model that? Because for me, I love modeling. I love looking at economic models because I used to be a banker on Wall Street, right? And we can model war or we can model peace. What are the economics of peace versus the economics of war? And it boils down to the intention and the motivations of people in charge. So if it makes more economic sense to have war, then they'll lead to policies and execution strategies that will lead to conflict, right? Whereas if we're going to model peace, what are the economics of peace that we can model that out? So it actually is far more beneficial to have peace versus not peace. So through that framework, I believe that if we were to adopt into that, to look at, as David mentioned earlier, collective power. And I call it something different because I was trained classically in business. And one thing that we were taught way back was something called competition and strategy, right? So as I look at business plans today, I always look at the competitive landscape. Who's your competition? Who are you going to be in conflict with? But I think, over the last decade or so, we have evolved in a way that I think it begs a different framework for business. And maybe it's not so much about the competitive landscape as it should be about the collaborative landscape. Because if you look at how we produce things today, no one country has a monopoly on all things. And it begs us to really find some ways to do trade and the economics of trade where we get to focus on our own advantage so that when we trade, we actually can offer the best thing out there and buy things that are less competitive to ourselves, right? So through the framework of collectiveness and collaboration, maybe there are ways that if there are economic benefits to having peace versus not peace, then hopefully the leaders of our world can look at that from that angle. But I bring it back to this notion of intention, because if the intention is to cause havoc and cause conflict because there's economic benefit for certain people, not everybody, but for certain people, then people will pursue that path. And that's what we're seeing today in spades around the world today, right? So I go back to what I said earlier. It's about identifying the individual consciousness, because through that lens and through that framework of individual consciousness, hopefully we can have a sense of our individual mission here on Earth. Because, if you boil economics down into dollar signs into the bank account, that's not something you can take with you on your last day on Earth, right? And money is just energy. And the question is, what do you get to do with it while you're here to hopefully, find purpose for yourself, but also leave something behind. as a legacy for generations to come. And I hope people would recognize that that is the true value of what they get to create. And it boils down to discovering yourself through understanding what a better reality is, right? Through consciousness and meditation, and other frameworks that I think are useful in terms of why we're here today on this planet.
Wow. I'm just whenever you speak, I'm always just like, because it's.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for being the embodiment of conscious entrepreneurship and conscious leadership. That was such a wealth of wisdom what you just shared, and I'm just always in awe of you and how you lead, and also grateful for you that you lead networks and communities across the world of conscious entrepreneurs, and also building businesses from the ground up with these practices and with this awareness and intention, as you shared, because it really comes from the intention of what are we building, and also it really supporting. I'm so grateful for you for supporting entrepreneurs and leaders with their businesses so that they can implement these practices from the beginning. So I'm curious from that lens, what are some you just shared some, and also if you could please expand upon some ways that and practices that the conscious entrepreneurs can embed into their businesses, and also business leaders can embed into their businesses to
Well,
lead in a more conscious way.
I would say it's about this because uh, we are being disrupted, right, by technology. And we all know that AI is here. AI is not going away. And artificial intelligence, if it has the people creating AI have the intentions of creating a better world, then that's great. But with any new technology, there will be disruption, and the disruption comes in the form of job losses, as we're seeing across the board, whether it's manufacturing or even white collar jobs, right? That are losing ground in terms of its hiring. So the question becomes, what do we get to do as people, right? If you're working for a high-end consulting company or an accounting firm or a legal firm, or you're a factory worker, whatever it may be, and your jobs are getting cut, then how do you define yourself? Because we define ourselves so much through our work, right? That's the nature of what we are as human beings. And the question is, how do we discover our uniqueness? And a lot of people end up in these corporate jobs because it's easy to say, well, somebody's going to define my job and pay me X dollars a year and I'll be happy, right? I can buy a house and do all these things. But at the end of the day, at the end of your life, let's say, and you look back and you ask yourself, was that my purpose? Was I happy doing that job for 50 years? I would hope that most people say yes, but the reality is most people say no. That job was kind of okay, or that job was kind of not so great, right? And when you're at the end of life, and you ask yourself that question, I would hope that people felt a sense of satisfaction in what they got to do. And I feel that entrepreneurship is the ultimate form of creativity. And when we were in Miami, Maryn, right, at Art Basel, in Bit Basel, I asked artists these questions, what does it take to be a great artist? And artists may not have a roadmap per se, but they create on the basis of heart and vision. And sometimes if the world doesn't like it, that's okay. They fulfilled the mission. And I see entrepreneurship in a similar light because, the entrepreneur is about finding ways to discover himself or herself through that vision and creativity in ways that other people haven't discovered yet. And if you can do that because you're uniquely you and you get to create something that changes the planet in a positive way, well, I think that in some ways is the key to having that right intention for yourself. So I feel that it really is about discovery of self through consciousness. And hopefully through that process, we can identify entrepreneurs that are truly true to themselves and create products and companies that really change the world for a better place and having this mindset of abundance versus scarcity, because obviously with AI and we think, oh, there are only X jobs available and 10% of the workforce is going to get cut from a particular company, that's a scarcity mindset. So instead of saying, I want that job, it should be, in my opinion, I should be go out there to do something else that's going to be uniquely me that nobody else can do. And I get to create that market. I get to create my own customers. And through that process, I get to grow the pie versus trying to cut that pie into smaller pieces and taking a smaller piece of it. Right.
Absolutely. And I love that frame of the abundance mindset rather than the scarcity mindset, because it truly is, how we can create the better products and services that are unique to us. And really, and thank you for empowering people to do that and creating these models and frameworks that can be applied universally for how we can create better businesses and also empower creativity and innovation on an individual and also collective basis. So thank you so much for that. And also before we move on, and we do have a couple more minutes as well, since we are the last panel, and I'm very grateful for that, because this is such a wealth of wonderful wisdom that you all are sharing. And just the last question for you, David, is what are some parallels? What can these larger corporations learn from entrepreneurs and from the models and frameworks that you shared, beyond what you already shared? Because there's a lot to learn from what you already shared, of course. And also, if there's anything else that businesses can learn, these large corporations can learn from these frameworks and models that you've created.
Well, there are two things, because obviously a large company versus a startup operates rather differently. But I think it boils down to a bit of long-term view of the world versus short-term. And unfortunately, we're so short-term oriented, especially if you're a public company. Wall Street looks at your quarterly earnings and they judge you, and they judge your stock price based on that. But if you take a longer-term perspective on your company and how it impacts the world, I think that could be really, really helpful, right? And the other aspect as related to that is really about this notion of shareholder value, right? As I was taught in business school way back, that's what we look at is shareholder value. But as we think about whether that really works or not in terms of a long-term perspective and whether that could be sustainable, and your company's impact for society and shareholders, I would try to expand that and go beyond shareholder value and say it's really about stakeholder value. And you can model that too. How do you value your employees? How do you value customers? How do you value other things that are just not one-dimensionally measurable based on shareholder value? Right? If you look at all the components of what makes your business successful, and you treat those stakeholders, fairly, right, and equitably, then I think that lends for a longer-term sustainable solution for your company.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that. That actually reminds me so much, just on a personal note, of my great grandfather Harry Soref, who created Masterlock, and in the factory from the beginning of the company, he invented Masterlock and then created the original Masterlock factory in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And that was exactly his practice, as he employed everyone, people of all races, all colors, men, women, and paid everyone fairly and equitably for their role, and created a family atmosphere with the company. So and now over 100 years later, Masterlock is still a thriving company and has gone through multiple shareholder and also stakeholder profitabilities and expansions in so many ways. So what you just shared is very, very near and dear to my heart, and also exactly how my family was able to build the wealth that we enjoy, and also as a responsibility, as the next gen, I very much feel like, it's my responsibility to make the world a better place, however I can, and in honor of my great grandfather and my grandfather and father and parents and ancestors and what they created. What can I do to create a better world for us all and for future generations? So with that note, before we conclude for the day, I'd love to hear from all of you of your vision for what you are each doing in the world, and your legacy. If you have some notes on your legacy, and also your prayer for future generations, and what you see forecasting for future generations, from each of your missions and purpose. And whoever feels called to go first, please go first. And this is a bit off script, so
Sure. No, yeah, I'll be happy. I think it's great. I think both Davids have sort of expanded on the thoughts of, things that go beyond financial ROI to societal and personal ROI. And I think that you have to have a very broad view of that, and especially this whole notion of scarcity versus abundance, because it's very difficult for peace, whether it's internal peace or whether it's external peace, to thrive in an environment where there's scarcity. So to be able to create more abundance, both personally and commercially, I think is such a noble opportunity and a noble cause to embrace. So that's kind of my takeaway from the panels and the wisdom that's been put out here. And certainly, my prayer is that folks would find inner peace first, because that's where it starts. Indeed, and then blossom out from there.
beautiful.
I would echo that, what Bill said. It's about inner peace, but it's also grounding yourself. And what I am a big fan of, as you know, Maryn, is being in nature, right? And trees, and got a project on trees as well. If we are part of nature, if we can find ways to ground ourselves and center ourselves and listen to our inner voice and use that as a bit of guidance, I think that goes a long ways.
And I'll end. So, well, one, I'll say, look, the sustainable business can support peace by reducing inequality, preventing resource conflicts, strengthening institutions, fostering cooperation, building community, right? Just creating the conditions for peace and the like. And we each have a role in being able to do that. And so I just invite us all to be working together to move that in our own unique and creative ways, because that is the pathway forward. And it's got to be our pathway forward if we're here for future generations as well.
And absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing all of this amazing wisdom, and truly, between everyone's perspectives, it is the pathway and the infrastructure for peace on Earth, and also how businesses can contribute to creating a peaceful outcome by utilizing conscious business practices and frameworks. And I'm so grateful for all of you for pioneering those models of how that can be done. And also, we invite and encourage global business networks to follow each of your models in business, and to support and engage with all of you, and with these frameworks that can be utilized for sustainability, and also for ultimately the outcome of peace, prosperity, and thriving for all. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing, and for pioneering all of these important infrastructure and frameworks and models, and practices that we can all follow. Thank you for lighting the way. I'm so grateful for all of you, and grateful to be here with all of you. Thank you so much.
Maryn, an incredible panel. Thank you so much, everyone. This has probably been my favorite panel from a very long time, and we've been doing this for decades. So David Chen, David Levine, William Deuchler, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And of course, Maryn, grateful for you to be here, grateful for the Peace Train, for the Peace Pledge, for what you guys are forming. And from Davos Worldwide, we will be signing off after this panel for today. So there could not have been a better panel to do that with. I appreciate you all. Continue the good work. Looking forward to working closely with all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anand.
Take care.